So thanks everyone for joining. This session is focused on compliance. It's not just about email and stay away from the speaker and instant messaging anymore. What does that mean? What it means is that organizations are deploying new communication networks every single day. And ultimately what's created is a new series of information risks as well as compliance issues. So we're going to talk about some of these things that are arising today and what companies can do to alleviate some of these concerns. Just one simple case in point. On the other side here, there's a session on organizations moving from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. There's technology issues, obviously, but there's also compliance issues. There's new features, there's new capabilities. Your compliance organizations, your InfoSec stakeholders, your lawyers want to know what's going to happen now that you have this video sharing capability, now that you can put things on a desktop. These are all creating exposures that organizations need to have a plan for. So before I begin, just a quick introduction on who I am and our organization. What do we bring to the table here? My name is Robert Cruz. I've been in the compliance space for over a decade, working with firms in determining how they can build policies and technologies to support the deployment of new communication networks. So the company I represent is Smarsh, and Smarsh is basically a new firm that's in the process of merging with a company called Actians. We both have been in the game of compliant capture, archiving, and policy controls for communications for the past decade. We work with some of the largest firms, the largest banks, the largest manufacturing companies in the world. We work very closely with Microsoft. We're a Microsoft Gold partner. We work very closely with the Skype for Business team and now the Microsoft Teams group. And a part of that discussion is, how can I build compliance controls so that I can safely deploy these communication networks? And so that's essentially the relationship we have with Microsoft. We've deployed over 5 million seats on some of Microsoft's technologies. Some banks are running more than 40 to 50,000 seats on Skype for Business or on Teams or across Office 365. So these tend to be very large organizations, but they're also firms in the small to medium-sized category as well. And we provide controls for the entire Microsoft stack. So, all the channels you see here, plus about 73 other networks. Things like WebEx Teams from Cisco, and Slack, and Symphony, and FactSet, and IceChat, and all the public social media networks, and communications that are being delivered on a mobile device. So that's our expertise of helping to bring these communication networks under control. Let's get to the heart of the matter. The deployment of communication networks. You see across this entire building a lot of discussion of new collaborative capabilities that firms are deploying. And let me ask you folks to start off. How many folks are allowing the use of social media within your organizations? Let's say Twitter, LinkedIn, a good number of hands. Are outlining what individuals can and cannot do on their mobile devices. You have policies? Do you have technologies? A good number of hands for both. All right, let's bring it home. Office 365, how many companies are today in production on Office 365? Relatively similar number of hands. How about Microsoft Teams? Rolled out, in production, fewer hands, not surprising given where we are. Final question. For companies that are here attending this conference, making a big investment of your time, how many have either licensed Microsoft technology or thinking about it, yet to deploy? Anybody just still in that process of deployment? Okay, that's where we really get to the heart here, because clearly there's issues about employee training. There's issues and concerns you have to work through to create cultural moving your culture to get people to accustom to these new networks. But I'll guarantee you the vast majority of companies that we talk to, that we work with every day, the reason they have not yet deployed are because of the people sitting in the back. The people sitting in the back are the compliance officer, the InfoSec executive, the person that's managing litigation. And what they want to make sure that you have in place are controls to make sure that you can capture and retain that data to meet all the obligations you have to meet, whether they're regulatory driven, your own information governance policies, or what have you. And this is only getting bigger. So a typical bank that we work with today has more than 40 different communication networks that they're aware of. And every one of these firms is also concerned that there's people out there that are using WeChat and WhatsApp and Snapchat, because that's the way people are communicating. And that last point is what I want to leave you with, is that why is this happening? From a technology perspective, it's great. But the reason this is happening for a lot of organizations is because this is where your customer is going. This is the way they want to engage. So it's a question of what new network is going to show up. It's because your business is driving you this direction. They want to engage in a channel that allows for immediate response. So this trend is only increasing. Now, is this just deployment of a new communication network? What's the big deal? I've got another system I have to monitor and manage. Well, the big deal is this. What people have been accustomed to is transactional, it's binary, it's flat. Email is very deterministic. When you get technologies like Microsoft Teams or WebEx Teams or Symphony or Slack, or information that can be delivered uniquely over a mobile device, you have a whole new set of issues you've got to sort through, because you're not just looking at messages, you are looking at conversations. Conversations are dynamic. In a Microsoft Teams discussion, you may be talking with 4 people that you know about, and you're discussing maybe an item that is intellectual property. But then there's call-in user 5 that's unidentified. Who is this person? Or there's another person that comes and goes from this discussion. Hey, this could be a regulatory event because there's activity happening on these networks that have business value. Areas where you can be compromising and exposing your intellectual property. So the fact that these are rich and dynamic, you can engage in sharing files, in having a video that you can share, in delivering information out to your clients. These are areas that you now have to expand your control over. The last comment here is we have a couple of banks that have told us they've uncovered entire conversations that were encoded in emojis. 2 frowns, a palm tree, and a couple of angry birds means that Purdue Pharma is going down 5%. It was a conversation being conducted with emojis. And the fact, is this insignificant? Is this of interest? Well, the fact is, emojis can convey emotion and sentiment. This might be important to understand if you're looking at an insider trade and somebody's trying to cover an activity that may be malicious. So, rich and dynamic is the problem that these new networks are now exposed, are now creating. Now, why is this a problem? So what? The entire population of legal review tools that are in the market today are designed for email. The overriding vast majority of archiving tools that individuals are using to meet their books and records requirements to do their supervisory review are designed for email. The vast majority of data loss prevention tools are designed for email. The problem is that you have a rich conversation that's evolving where I post something, that there's now a like or a share or a comment. When you deliver this information into a tool that's designed for email, what happens? Each of these elements becomes an individual item that loses its association with everything else that happened before. What you've done is lost the context. I don't know who's communicating with whom about what. And more importantly, what if items were changed or deleted? You now have an event. It's not just something that's making the process more complicated. It's also creating more exposure, because that change in a post could be something that's relevant for e-discovery. So what? Organizations, as they think about how they can implement risk management controls, they either do that from a regulatory compliance oversight, or maybe a periodic inspection from your InfoSec department, or someone that's doing kind of the day-to-day, month-to-month supervisory review grind. What we have found in talking to organizations is that even though the communication networks they use have changed, the way they conduct review is the same. And the answers are kind of interesting. It's like, why do you still do it that way? Well, it's the way we've always done it. It's like the pattern here of reviewing and focusing an inordinate amount of energy and time on email is still something we find organizations are stuck with. Large organizations, small organizations, across the board. Even though the elements of risk are beginning to become more prevalent, there's more cases, both legally as well as from regulatory perspective, where the issue, the subject at hand is voicemail, or it's IM, or it's some collaborative tool. I think the most important element here is think of an individual whose intent is to avoid detection. They are going to go somewhere where they think you aren't. So if they believe the focus of attention and energy is on email, they're likely to do things on social media or on a collaborative platform. And you're going to find phrases like, let's take this offline, or let's jump to another channel. This is an actual phrase, channel jumping. I started on Skype for Business, I went to Microsoft Teams, I'm now on Symphony, let's bring it over to Slack. So the problem is that people are focusing not where the risk is, they're focusing where the volume of content still resides. So what organizations we talk to are looking for, they're looking for one unified view of risk. You know, there's an individual in the back of the room who is the high-risk broker. There's a person that I know is frequently getting caught up in issues where they may be involved in disclosure of sensitive information. I want to have a complete view of that individual. If I know that Dave Luisi is the guy that I have to pay attention to, I want to know what his login is on Microsoft Teams. I want to know how he's identified on Skype for Business. I want to know what he's doing on LinkedIn. I want to create that one unified view, because ultimately what I'm trying to understand is not the content. I'm trying to understand the behavior. So I need to match the content with the activity to really understand where the risk resides. What are the kinds of issues that might come up along the way? So the things organizations we hear are, what they're looking for is insight. They want to be able to understand who said what to whom. They want to be able to understand where the critical risk resides. Going back to that, the chart of where review time is being spent, it's being spent on activity, not the things that are most critical to your business. And finally, it's not just about compliance and regulation. It's about governance. It's about where is the sensitive information? Where is the information that has value? I want to be able to track those critical assets wherever they may go within my organization. So one of the topics that, you know, I've heard some very interesting material, some really insightful and informative technological developments that Microsoft and others are rolling out in the area of artificial intelligence and machine learning and surveillance. And it's a really good question. It's like, have the machines won this game? Is it basically the complexity and the variety of communications now is something that's better addressed by machines? And I think it's a very interesting discussion to have. And I think in the area of surveillance and artificial intelligence in particular, there's a great amount of value that can be brought in helping to uncover risks that I may not be aware of, where I need to match content with behavior, with sentiment, with other things that I might find through the use of artificial intelligence. So extensions to what people are doing now, this makes perfect sense. There's technology that is accessible and a bunch of domains that are underneath the AI umbrella, which, you know, companies are making significant investments in. But to the point, you know, where is the information risk? Do I have a finger on what important communications are being delivered? I would contend that you need to be able to address both sides of the spectrum. So what's the basic? The basic requirements are any regulated organization needs to have an understanding of how they can meet their books and records obligations. Any industry that has a records retention obligation has to do this. If you're a publicly traded corporation and you have to deal with the SEC and the fair disclosure requirement, as does Elon Musk and Tesla, when he starts talking about taking the company private, he's got to deal with how he's going to respond to the SEC. You've got to do the basic policy definition. Let me identify the words and phrases which are sensitive. Do that regular interval of review to deal with the known risks, the things that I've seen before. Where we believe the extension applies is using surveillance, using analytics to be able to look at the behaviors, the proactive, the activity that's happening over a period of time to expose things you've not seen before, take those findings and feed that back into whatever you're using for compliance review and risk mitigation. So one way that we've looked at this is something that we're promoting thanks to the brilliant work of some of our product guys in the back of the room, the concept of superveillance. Think of compliance controls as delivering the basic enforcement of policy. If I'm deploying Microsoft Teams, I want to have the ability to block specific features. I want to be able to monitor for where there's restricted words and phrases that I have to pay attention to. I want to be able to store that information in a repository that allows me to search and retrieve that data easily. And if I have to do supervision where I sit down and look at policies to make sure there's not an issue happening, I can take care of all of those things. On the other side of the spectrum, I want to be able to interoperate, kind of interact with the analytics, to be able to uncover the things I may not be aware of, to be able to add to that information the behavior, the sentiment, the things that I'm going to learn from a BehaveOps or digital reasoning or IBM Surveillance Insights or some of the innovative Microsoft technologies that are being deployed. Specialized domains. I want to deliver, feed, and interact with that data. So one case that we've come up against that I think this is going to be something that many industries begin to see. Financial services firms that are investigating things like insider trades. Again, your compliance systems are enabling you to look at static transactions. It's much more difficult to look at a pattern that's happening over time. So in this particular example, what people are doing is using our technology to make sure that all the relevant communications are captured, they're being stored, you're providing that first level of review so I can see where there might be issues to pay attention to. Now that I know those issues are out there, I want to deliver that information into a surveillance application, in this case, Surveillance Insight, to match against the sentiment, to match against the other data, the transactional information. I have to do this today for MiFID II in the EU, if any of you have EU operations. So from that, I'm able to identify where those activities are and feed that back into my repository. So lots of real-world use cases where you can bring both of these areas of technology, both domains together. So let me wrap it up. What are we seeing as ways that organizations can control the emerging use of these new communication networks? First, you got to deal with the fundamentals. AI is not going to replace the things you have to do as part of your information governance programs, as part of your records management protocols, as what you do to deal with your regulatory obligations every day. Second, context is imperative. Stuffing things into the form of an email, you lose the context. So you need to be thinking about, for any tools you have to archive and preserve data, is it allowing me to preserve what the rich experience of Microsoft Teams looks like? Preserving that context of that conversation is critical. Third, you need to anticipate that there will always be the next network. You know, we say we support, I think the number today is 83 different communication networks. Next week that's going to be 85. There's always going to be a new one. The regulators have told us and our customers that you have to have the expectation that every new application you deploy is going to have a messaging application attached to it, including the things on a mobile device. So you always have to be anticipating the next network that your business users are going to be banging on the door asking you to support. Next, a lot of these things are really about policy enforcement. How can I ensure that if I have to block messages, because that's what my DLP policy requires for email, how can I do that on OneDrive or Yammer or on some other Microsoft network or some other network on social media? Enforcement of policies uniformly. What can I do natively with all of the tools that are available from Microsoft, and where can I work with third parties like Smarsh to be able to extend some of those controls? The other element is just critical from where we've seen the fact that we're munging together so many different domains is that the platforms that you're storing this information, whether you're using the Microsoft Office native capabilities in the Security and Compliance Center or another third-party tool, you don't want to use the cloud to create yet another siloed environment. You need these systems to be able to feed other applications. You need APIs and SDKs to be able to deliver information, the payload, to where it needs to be, whether that's for compliance, that's for e-discovery, that's for information and InfoSec obligation and inspection of emerging threats. And the last point, the science of doing policy management. Firms have gotten these infrastructures in place over multiple years. They've refined lexicons. They've known how to do that. But you really have to keep this in balance with the art forms now that are emerging with AI, machine learning, and surveillance, is keeping these things in context of one another. So a lot of best practice discussion, and for more specifics on how we address this, come to our booth The number is, Alex, our booth? 1605. We're over there by the Rubric giant booth. But I'll leave you with this, because I think this reflects not only what we do, but I think these are some of the things you need to think about as you look for technologies to help mitigate some of these risks. First, on the capture side, you need to go where your client is. You need to have the ability to support any communication channel that you're allowing your employees to use. And not just the simple capture, but policy enforcement. If you need to have the abilities to block a message or spot for sensitive words or phrases, it's enforcing those policies. It's capturing the right stuff, not over-preserving. It's capturing the information that has value or risk. Next, in the way that you reveal, it's not just storing the data. It's like, I want to have technology that allows me to expose where the issues are. So something that's allowing me to do robust supervisory review, to be able to spot where these more critical items might reside. So being able to quickly deliver this information. And when I talk about reveal, a lot of this has to do with performance. It's not just search performance. It's quickly getting the data into the system, being able to search very fast against the data, and to be able to export that data downstream. You need throughput, not just the ability to search on an item quickly. And finally, the response. Goes hand in hand with the performance. It's the ability to allow your legal, compliance, and IT staff to serve themselves, to be able to respond to the regulator faster, to get in front of the end user to say, wait a minute, you're on an area of Microsoft Teams that's restricted by policy. Are you make sure that doesn't happen again. We have these controls that send up flags when something happens, so just be aware as part of that training. You can respond to those individuals and correct this from happening the second time. 1605 is where we're located. Appreciate your time. Hopefully you can come by. Would love to show you some more about how we help both within the Microsoft infrastructure as well as other communication forms. So with that, I'm not sure time-wise, are we at it? I'll be around. Happy to chat with you further or back at the booth. So thanks again for attending.